Okay, so we know that executing this program displays 100 because the P inside of Q's definition refers to the first one. But there's still an important question that we have to answer. How does Q remember this P? Okay, somehow the procedure Q has to remember that it's this P and not the other one. How does it remember it? So somehow this procedure, it has to store a reference to the first variable inside of itself in memory. Well, that's exactly what happens. In fact, Q is going to store an environment inside the definition of the procedure in memory, which is called the contextual environment, and this environment will contain P. So the contextual environment of Q, they call it EC, is equal to an environment that contains the identifier P that references a small p, which is in fact a variable in memory, which is bound to the definition of the first procedure. Okay? So that's the contextual environment. Now, a second question is, which identifiers inside of a procedure body have to be stored in the contextual environment? In fact, if you think about it, you can figure out what it has to be. It has to be those identifiers that Q has to remember because there's no other way for Q to remember them. So, for example, it does not need to reference the arguments. Q has no arguments, but if it would have arguments, they don't need to be referenced because they are brought in at the call. It's the other identifiers. In fact, it's those identifiers in the procedure body that are not defined in that procedure body, but are defined outside. Those are the ones that Q has to remember. So the contextual environment contains the free identifiers of the procedure. Okay, so for example, if we have here a procedure inc x, y, and here I have y is equal to x plus a, for example, in this procedure there are two arguments, x and y, and inside the procedure body there are three identifiers, y, x, and a. Now x and y are defined as arguments, so we don't have to keep them in the contextual environment. In fact, they're not free, they're defined as arguments. But a is used inside the procedure and not defined inside the procedure, so a is free. So the contextual environment of inc is going to be a pointing to a variable, little a, whatever that a is bound to in memory. Okay, now let me explain a little bit more. So contextual environments are related to procedures, but free identifiers are defined for any instruction. So here's another instruction, local z in z is equal to x plus y. Okay, so this one has three identifiers, z, x, and y. The z here inside is actually defined inside the instruction, so it's not free, but x and y are used inside the instruction but defined outside. So this instruction has free identifiers x and y. Okay? So the contextual environment, to summarize, contains all the identifiers that a procedure has to know when it's run, which means all the identifiers inside the procedure body that are not defined inside the procedure body. And you can determine that by textual inspection. That means by just looking at the procedure and thinking a little bit.